On a crisp autumn morning in downtown Chicago, a distinguished gentleman walked into Heritage National Bank, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Despite his impeccably tailored navy suit and genuine leather briefcase, something about him made the young teller's smile fade as he approached her window. The man had grown accustomed to these subtle shifts in expression throughout his life. At 45, he'd built an empire from nothing, but his success couldn't shield him from prejudice. He needed to make a large cash deposit for one of his newest business ventures, a chain of community centers in underserved neighborhoods. "Good morning," he said warmly, placing his briefcase on the counter. "I'd like to make a deposit." His voice carried the weight of authority, though he spoke softly. The teller barely glanced up from her computer screen. "Do you have an account with us?" Her tone was cold, dismissive. "Yes, I do," he replied patiently, sliding his ID and deposit slip across the counter. The amount on the slip made her eyes widen momentarily, $250,000 in certified checks. She examined his ID with exaggerated scrutiny, then looked at her computer screen. "I'm sorry, but I'll need to speak with my supervisor about this transaction." Her voice dripped with suspicion. "It's unusual." The man remained composed, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Of course. I understand." He'd been through this before, the assumptions, the subtle accusations, the implied dishonesty. While they waited, other customers entered the bank. The teller cheerfully served them, processing their transactions without question. The man stood quietly, checking emails on his phone, each ping representing another business decision awaiting his attention. Finally, the branch manager arrived, a folder in her hands. "Sir, could you please come with me? We need to verify some information." Her tone suggested this was more than standard procedure. As they walked toward her office, they passed the bank's newly installed dedication plaque. The manager was so focused on her folder that she didn't notice her customer's eyes lingering on the brass plate. Inside her office, she settled behind her desk. "Sir, we take security very seriously at Heritage National. These checks are completely legitimate," he finished calmly. "Just like they were last month, and the month before that." He reached into his briefcase and retrieved a business card. "Perhaps this will help clear things up." The manager's face transformed as she read the card, then quickly glanced at the plaque outside her office, the one commemorating the bank's recent acquisition by Thompson Financial Group. The very same name that was printed on the card in her trembling hands. Mr. Thompson," she stammered. We had no idea." "Clearly," he replied, his voice level but firm. "I acquired Heritage National 6 months ago. I make regular visits to all our branches, usually unannounced. It helps me understand the true customer experience." The manager's face had turned pale. "The man, Mr. Thompson," continued, "I've spent 30 minutes watching your teller treat me with suspicion while warmly serving other customers. I've built this business on the principle that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance." He stood up, straightening his jacket. "I'm not angry, but I am disappointed. This isn't the level of service I expect from my banks. I'd like to complete my transaction now, and then we should discuss how to improve our customer service training." Word spread quickly through the bank. The teller who had treated him so dismissively couldn't meet his eyes as she processed his deposit, her hands shaking slightly. Other employees whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the man who owned not just this branch, but the entire regional banking network. As he prepared to leave, Mr. Thompson paused. He turned back to the teller, who looked like she might burst into tears. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said quietly. "What matters is how we learn from them. I'll be back next month, let's see if we can do better." He walked out into the sunlight, his phone already buzzing with meeting reminders. Behind him, the bank's employees gathered in hushed conversation, the morning's events serving as a powerful lesson about prejudice and professionalism. The story spread through the banking community, though Mr. Thompson never publicly discussed the incident. He did, however, implement comprehensive bias training across all his branches. The young teller kept her job, eventually becoming one of the bank's most vocal advocates for inclusive customer service. 1 year later, that same branch won the company's Customer Service Excellence Award. During the ceremony, Mr. Thompson shared the stage with the once prejudiced teller, now a changed person. Together, they unveiled a new plaque, this one reading, "Every customer deserves respect. Every interaction matters." It wasn't just about teaching a lesson or proving a point. For Mr. Thompson, it was about creating lasting change. He understood that real transformation doesn't come from punishment, but from education and understanding. His response to prejudice wasn't revenge, but rather an opportunity to make his bank better, to help his employees grow, and to set an example for the entire industry. The incident became a cornerstone of the bank's training program, though names and details were always changed to protect privacy. New employees learned that success isn't about the clothes someone wears or the color of their skin, it's about treating everyone with dignity and respect. As for Mr. Thompson, he continued his unannounced visits to various branches, but now he often found himself being greeted with genuine smiles and professional service, regardless of his appearance. The lesson had been learned, not just at that one branch, but throughout his entire banking network. His story served as a reminder that change is possible, that prejudice can be overcome, and that sometimes the best response to discrimination is not anger, but education. In the end, it wasn't just about a bank owner teaching his employees a lesson, it was about making the banking industry a little bit better, one interaction at a time. The ripple effects of that memorable morning at Heritage National Bank continued to spread. Mr. Thompson's approach to handling prejudice became a case study in effective leadership, though few knew the full story behind the changes sweeping through the banking industry. 3 months after the incident, Heritage National launched a groundbreaking community banking initiative. The same branch that had once shown such poor judgment now led the way in providing financial services to underserved communities. The transformation was remarkable, but it wasn't without its challenges. Mr. Thompson focused on creating lasting change rather than quick fixes. He understood that true transformation required more than just mandatory training sessions. Under his guidance, Heritage National began offering microloans to small business owners who might have been overlooked by traditional banking standards. The former teller, now working as a community outreach coordinator, threw herself into the new initiatives. Her personal experience had sparked a genuine passion for inclusive banking. She often shared her story during training sessions, though she never revealed that the customer she'd misjudged was the bank's owner. "I learned that day that character isn't about appearance," she would tell new employees. "It's about actions and treating everyone with dignity." Her candid admissions about her past prejudices helped others confront their own biases. Word of Heritage National's transformation spread through the financial community. Other banks took notice as the once modest regional chain began attracting customers from all walks of life. Mr. Thompson's philosophy of respect and inclusion was proving to be not just morally right, but also good for business. 1 year after the incident, Heritage National opened its first community financial center in a historically underserved neighborhood. The same teller who had once shown such prejudice was chosen to manage it. Under her leadership, the center became a model for inclusive banking practices. The center offered more than just basic banking services. It provided financial literacy workshops, small business mentoring, and community gathering spaces. Local residents who had never felt comfortable in traditional banks found themselves welcomed and respected. Mr. Thompson made regular visits to this center, often sitting in on the financial literacy classes. He took pride in seeing how his response to that morning of prejudice had sparked such positive change. The center's success led to the opening of similar facilities across the city. During one of these visits, an elderly woman approached him after a workshop on retirement planning. "You've changed things around here," she said, not knowing she was speaking to the owner. It used to be that folks like us didn't feel welcome in banks. Now my grandchildren are opening their first savings accounts. These words meant more to Mr. Thompson than any profit margin or industry award. He had turned a moment of discrimination into an opportunity for transformation, not just for one branch or one employee, but for entire communities. The story could have ended differently. He could have responded to prejudice with anger, could have fired the teller, could have made an example of her. Instead, his measured response created a ripple effect of positive change throughout the banking industry. As Heritage National continued to grow, Mr. Thompson never forgot the lessons of that autumn morning. He maintained his practice of unannounced visits to various branches, though now he was more likely to find employees living up to his standards of inclusive service than falling short of them. The former teller, now a respected leader in community banking, occasionally crossed paths with Mr. Thompson at corporate events. They never directly discussed that morning, but there was always a moment of mutual understanding, a shared recognition of how one incident, handled with wisdom and grace, could transform not just individual lives but entire institutions. 5 years after the incident, Heritage National had become known as the most inclusive bank in the region. Other financial institutions sought to emulate its community-focused approach. Mr. Thompson was invited to speak at banking conferences, where he shared his philosophy without ever revealing the personal experience that had inspired it. Banking isn't just about money, he would tell his audiences. It's about people. It's about treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or background. When we do that, everyone benefits, our customers, our employees, and our communities. The story continues to inspire new generations of bankers, though most don't know its true origins. At Heritage National, it's simply known as the Thompson Principle, the idea that every customer deserves respect, and every interaction is an opportunity to make banking better for everyone. The lessons learned that autumn morning continue to shape the culture of Heritage National Bank, serving as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice is not confrontation, but transformation. The impact of Mr. Thompson's leadership continued to create waves in the banking industry. 10 years after that pivotal morning at Heritage National, the bank had expanded to become one of the most respected financial institutions in the country, known for its inclusive practices and community-focused approach. At a national banking conference in Washington, D.C., Mr. Thompson took the stage as the keynote speaker. The audience was filled with banking executives eager to learn the secret behind Heritage National's remarkable success. None of them knew they were about to hear, for the first time, the full story that had transformed the industry. Success in banking isn't measured solely by profits, Mr. Thompson began, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. It's measured by the lives we touch and the communities we serve. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Let me tell you a story about a morning that changed everything. As he recounted the events of that autumn day, the audience sat in stunned silence. The story of how he had turned discrimination into opportunity resonated deeply with everyone present. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. That conference marked a turning point. Heritage National's community-focused model began to be adopted nationwide. Banks that had once focused solely on profit margins started to recognize the value of inclusive banking practices. The former teller, now the regional director of community development at Heritage National, stood proudly in the audience. Her journey from that morning of prejudice to becoming a leading advocate for inclusive banking had inspired countless others in the industry. Mr. Thompson had expanded the community financial centers to over 50 locations across the country. Each center operated on the principle that financial services should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their background or appearance. The centers offered free financial literacy programs, small business support, and personalized banking services. One particular success story stood out. A young entrepreneur, who had once been turned away by multiple banks, found support at a Heritage National Community Center. With guidance and a small business loan, she built a successful chain of organic food stores that now employed over 300 people in underserved communities. The transformation wasn't just about banking services. Heritage National had created a mentorship program that paired experienced bankers with young people from diverse backgrounds interested in finance. The program had helped hundreds of individuals start careers in banking, bringing fresh perspectives to an industry that had long struggled with inclusion. Mr. Thompson remained hands-on in his approach to leadership. He still made unannounced visits to branches, though now he was more likely to find employees going above and beyond in their service to all customers. The culture of respect and inclusion had become deeply embedded in the bank's DNA. The original branch where the incident occurred had been converted into a training center. New employees from across the country came there to learn about Heritage National's approach to banking. The plaque reading, "Every customer deserves respect. Every interaction matters," had become the bank's official motto. During one training session, a young banker asked Mr. Thompson why he hadn't fired the teller who had shown such prejudice. His response became another lesson in leadership: change doesn't come from punishment. It comes from understanding, growth, and the opportunity to do better. The banking industry had noticed more than just Heritage National's inclusive practices. Their customer satisfaction rates were the highest in the industry, and their loan default rates were surprisingly low. It turned out that treating people with respect and providing them with the tools to succeed was also good business. Other banks began to follow Heritage National's lead, creating their own community programs and inclusive banking initiatives. The ripple effect had become a wave of change in the financial industry. The former teller, speaking at a community banking symposium, summed it up perfectly: "One morning of prejudice could have ended my career. Instead, it began a journey that changed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. It taught me that true banking isn't about transactions, it's about transformation." As Heritage National prepared to celebrate its 15th anniversary under Mr. Thompson's leadership, the bank had become more than just a financial institution. It was a model for how businesses could drive positive social change while remaining profitable. The story of that autumn morning continued to be shared, though now it was taught in business schools as a case study in effective leadership and social responsibility. Mr. Thompson had shown that the best response to prejudice wasn't retaliation, but rather using it as a catalyst for positive change. 20 years had passed since that transformative morning at Heritage National Bank. The bank had grown from a regional chain into a national institution, but Mr. Thompson's commitment to inclusive banking remained unchanged. At Heritage National's annual Leadership Summit, employees gathered to celebrate another milestone. The bank had just opened its 100th community financial center, this time in a rural area where traditional banks had long since closed their doors. The former teller, now the bank's executive vice president of community relations, took the stage. Her silver hair gleamed under the spotlights as she addressed the packed auditorium. Her journey from that autumn morning had become legendary within the company. "When we look at our success today," she began, "it's easy to forget where it all started. One morning, one interaction, one choice between anger and understanding changed not just my life, but the entire banking industry." Under her leadership, Heritage National had launched an innovative mobile banking program that brought financial services to remote communities. Special buses, equipped with banking technology and staffed by trained professionals, traveled to areas without physical bank branches. Mr. Thompson watched from the audience, pride evident in his eyes. His decision to transform prejudice into progress had created a legacy far beyond anything he had imagined. Heritage National was now studying the possibility of expanding internationally, bringing their inclusive banking model to developing nations. The bank's commitment to community development had produced remarkable results. Their microloans had helped launch over 10,000 small businesses. Their financial literacy programs had reached millions. Former students of these programs now owned homes, ran successful businesses, and sent their children to college. One particularly touching story involved a small town in the Midwest. When the last bank in town announced its closure, the community faced economic devastation. Heritage National stepped in, not just maintaining banking services but establishing a community financial center that became the heart of local economic revival. The bank's training program had evolved into the Heritage National Banking Academy, an accredited institution offering specialized courses in community banking and financial inclusion. Students came from around the world to learn the principles that had transformed American banking. Mr. Thompson still made his unannounced visits, though now he often brought along young executives in training. "Watch how our people interact with customers," he would tell them. "That's where you'll see our real values in action." The banking industry had changed dramatically over those 20 years. Other banks had followed Heritage National's lead, creating their own community programs. The concept of inclusive banking had become mainstream, though few knew it had started with one man's response to prejudice. During a quiet moment at the summit, Mr. Thompson found himself standing beside the former teller. They looked out over the crowd of employees, each representing the bank's commitment to respect and inclusion. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" she asked softly. Mr. Thompson smiled. "I knew we could make banking better," he replied. "But this? This has exceeded every dream I had." The summit concluded with the announcement of a new initiative, the Heritage National Foundation for Financial Inclusion. The foundation would provide grants to organizations working to bring banking services to underserved communities worldwide. As Mr. Thompson prepared to pass the torch to the next generation of leadership, his legacy was secure. Heritage National had become more than a bank, it was a movement, a force for positive change in the financial world. The story of that autumn morning continued to be shared, though now it was studied in universities worldwide as an example of how ethical leadership could transform an industry. Mr. Thompson had shown that success in banking wasn't just about managing money, it was about believing in people's potential and giving them the opportunity to succeed. What started as one man's dignified response to prejudice had grown into a global movement for financial inclusion. Heritage National Bank stood as proof that doing good and doing well in business weren't mutually exclusive, they were inextricably linked. 25 years into Heritage National's transformation, the bank faced its greatest challenge yet. The global financial crisis had shaken the banking industry to its core, but Heritage National's community-focused model proved remarkably resilient. During an emergency board meeting, Mr. Thompson, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, stood before his executives. "In times of crisis, character reveals itself," he declared. "This is when our commitment to community banking matters most." While other banks were closing branches and withdrawing from struggling communities, Heritage National doubled down on its inclusive approach. They launched an emergency assistance program for small businesses and homeowners affected by the economic downturn. The former teller, now the bank's president, implemented a bold strategy. Heritage National would use its substantial reserves to support communities through the crisis. They offered payment deferrals, restructured loans, and provided emergency financial counseling. The results were remarkable. While other banks faced massive defaults, Heritage National's community-centered approach kept default rates surprisingly low. Their customers fought hard to maintain their payments, feeling a personal connection to a bank that had stood by them. In Detroit, a Heritage National Community Center became a lifeline for local businesses. The center's manager, remembering the lessons of that autumn morning long ago, worked tirelessly to help entrepreneurs adapt to the changing economy. One auto parts manufacturer, facing bankruptcy, received guidance and emergency financing from Heritage National. With the bank's support, the company pivoted to producing electric vehicle components, saving 300 jobs and positioning itself for future growth. Mr. Thompson made more frequent visits to branches during the crisis, though now he walked with a cane. "We're not just protecting our assets," he would remind staff. "We're protecting people's dreams, their futures." The crisis also brought an unexpected opportunity. Several smaller banks, struggling to survive, approached Heritage National about possible mergers. Mr. Thompson agreed on one condition, that they adopt Heritage's inclusive banking model. The bank's training academy became a hub for crisis management education. Bankers from around the world came to learn how community-focused banking could create resilience during economic downturns. Heritage National's mobile banking program proved invaluable during this period. The banking buses became command centers for financial crisis response, bringing essential services to communities where other banks had pulled out. At a congressional hearing on banking reform, Mr. Thompson testified about the importance of community banking. Without revealing his personal story, he explained how treating customers with respect and dignity could create stronger, more stable financial institutions. The former teller, sitting beside him at the hearing, shared data showing how Heritage National's default rates remained significantly lower than the industry average, even in the hardest-hit communities. The crisis also sparked innovation. Heritage National developed new financial products specifically designed for economic recovery, including special loans for businesses transitioning to green technology and digital commerce. Their community centers expanded their services, offering workshops on crisis management, digital transformation, and sustainable business practices. The centers became more than just banks, they were economic recovery hubs. Mr. Thompson's approach had created not just a successful bank, but a resilient one. The prejudice he faced that autumn morning had led to a banking model that could withstand even the most severe economic storms. As the crisis began to ease, Heritage National emerged stronger than ever. Their commitment to community banking had proven that ethical business practices and financial success could go hand in hand, even in the toughest times. The story of that autumn morning continued to inspire, though now it carried an additional lesson. True strength in banking comes not from the size of your assets, but from the strength of your relationships with the communities you serve. 30 years had passed, and Heritage National Bank was preparing for a historic transition. Mr. Thompson, now in his 80s, was ready to announce his successor. The bank had grown beyond anyone's expectations, but its core values remained unchanged. The announcement came during Heritage National's annual Community Impact Celebration. The event was held in the very branch where that transformative morning had occurred 3 decades ago. The building had been preserved, though it now housed a museum dedicated to inclusive banking. Rising to the podium, Mr. Thompson's presence still commanded respect. Leadership, he began, is not about maintaining power. It's about preparing the next generation to carry our mission forward. To everyone's surprise, he announced that the bank's next CEO would be the granddaughter of a small business owner who had received one of Heritage National's first microloans. She had started as a teller, worked through every department, and embodied the bank's values of respect, inclusion, and community service. The former teller, now retiring alongside Mr. Thompson as the bank's president, embraced the new appointee. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who had once shown prejudice was now passing the torch to a leader who represented everything Heritage National had fought to achieve. Under the new leadership, Heritage National launched its most ambitious project yet, a global initiative to bring inclusive banking to developing nations. The project started in communities facing similar prejudices and barriers that Mr. Thompson had encountered that autumn morning. The bank's mobile banking program had evolved into a technological marvel. Electric vehicles equipped with satellite internet and advanced banking systems brought financial services to remote villages. Each vehicle carried the bank's motto, "Every customer deserves respect. Every interaction matters." Mr. Thompson made one final unannounced visit before his retirement. Walking through the original branch, now a training center, he met a young trainee who asked him about the bank's founding principles. "Banking is about more than money," he explained, his voice soft but firm. "It's about believing in people's potential, especially when others don't. Sometimes, the greatest opportunities come disguised as challenges." The Heritage National Banking Academy had become a prestigious institution, offering scholarships to students from underserved communities. Many graduates went on to start community banks in their own countries, spreading the principles of inclusive banking globally. The former teller's journey had become required reading in banking schools worldwide. Her transformation from showing prejudice to championing inclusive banking illustrated how one moment of realization could lead to a lifetime of positive change. As Mr. Thompson prepared to step down, Heritage National had grown to serve over 50 million customers worldwide. But more importantly, it had changed the way the banking industry viewed its role in society. During his final board meeting, Mr. Thompson shared the full story of that autumn morning one last time. The lesson was clear: success in banking wasn't just about financial metrics, it was about transforming lives and communities. The new CEO's first act was to establish the Thompson Legacy Fund, dedicated to supporting financial literacy and entrepreneurship in underserved communities worldwide. The fund's first project? Converting abandoned banks in rural areas into community financial centers. As Mr. Thompson walked out of the bank's headquarters for the last time, employees lined the streets to show their respect. Each one carried a small plaque with the bank's motto, a reminder that every interaction had the potential to change lives. The story of that autumn morning had come full circle. What began as one man's dignified response to prejudice had grown into a global movement for financial inclusion, proving that banking could be both profitable and purposeful. 35 years after that fateful morning, Heritage National Bank had become a global symbol of transformative banking. The new CEO was implementing Mr. Thompson's vision in ways he could never have imagined, adapting it for a rapidly changing digital age. At the bank's Global Leadership Conference, live streamed to employees worldwide, she unveiled the Digital Dignity Initiative. This groundbreaking program would use artificial intelligence and blockchain technology to ensure fair, unbiased banking services across all digital platforms. The former teller, though retired, remained active as a guest speaker at banking conferences. Her story of transformation resonated even more powerfully in an age where unconscious bias in digital banking had become a pressing concern. Heritage National's community centers had evolved into tech hubs, offering coding classes alongside traditional financial services. In underprivileged neighborhoods, these centers became incubators for the next generation of fintech entrepreneurs. One particularly successful program paired elderly customers with young tech mentors, ensuring that digital banking services remained accessible to all. This intergenerational approach embodied the bank's commitment to inclusive service in the digital age. The mobile banking fleet, now entirely electric and solar-powered, had expanded to serve remote communities on 5 continents. Each vehicle carried advanced biometric technology that helped prevent discrimination while protecting customer privacy. Mr. Thompson, now in his late 80s, made occasional appearances via holographic technology at bank events. His message remained unchanged: technology changes, but our commitment to human dignity never will. The Heritage National Banking Academy launched a new curriculum focusing on ethical AI in banking. Students learned to develop algorithms that could detect and prevent bias in automated banking decisions. In partnership with leading tech companies, Heritage National created a virtual reality training program that allowed employees to experience banking from different perspectives. This innovative approach to sensitivity training became an industry standard. The Thompson Legacy Fund had grown to support tech education in underserved communities worldwide. Its scholarship program had helped launch numerous fintech startups focused on financial inclusion. The original branch building, now a museum, added a new wing dedicated to the future of inclusive banking. Interactive exhibits showed visitors how technology could either perpetuate or eliminate financial discrimination. During a global economic forum, the CEO shared how Heritage National's ethical approach to digital transformation had actually accelerated their growth. Their customer base had grown to over 100 million, with the highest satisfaction rates in the industry. The story of that autumn morning continued to resonate, though now it was often told alongside stories of algorithmic bias and digital discrimination. The lesson remained the same: treating people with dignity was not just morally right, but essential for success. Heritage National's influence extended beyond banking. Their approach to ethical digital transformation became a model for other industries grappling with bias and discrimination in the age of automation. As Mr. Thompson watched his bank embrace the future while staying true to its principles, he knew that his response to prejudice that autumn morning had created a legacy that would continue to shape the future of banking for generations to come. The transformation of Heritage National from a regional bank to a global leader in ethical digital banking proved that success in the modern age didn't require sacrificing human values. Instead, those values had become more important than ever. 40 years had passed since that transformative morning at Heritage National Bank. The bank celebrated this milestone with a global virtual conference connecting millions of customers, employees, and partners across the world. Mr. Thompson, now in his 90s, appeared via hologram at the conference's opening ceremony. Though his hair had turned white and his voice was softer, his message remained powerful. What started as a response to prejudice became a revolution in banking. The bank had achieved remarkable milestones. Its AI-driven banking systems now served over 200 million customers while maintaining zero bias in lending decisions. The original mission of treating everyone with dignity had been perfectly translated into the digital age. Heritage National's newest initiative, Universal Access, used satellite technology and quantum computing to provide banking services to the most remote regions on Earth. Every transaction, whether worth $1 or $1 million, was treated with the same respect and attention. The former teller's story had been adapted into a virtual reality experience used in schools worldwide. Students could experience both sides of that autumn morning, learning firsthand how prejudice feels and how transformative respect can be. The bank's community centers had evolved into future finance hubs, offering education in quantum computing, space banking, and digital currencies. Yet they maintained their core mission, ensuring financial services remained accessible and respectful to all. Mr. Thompson's legacy extended far beyond banking. His approach to transforming prejudice into progress had influenced industries ranging from healthcare to space exploration. The Thompson principle of turning negative experiences into positive change had become a cornerstone of business education. Heritage National's AI systems were unique in the industry. Unlike other banks' automated systems, theirs included empathy algorithms based on Mr. Thompson's philosophy of respect and understanding. The original branch building had become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its role in transforming global finance. Millions visited annually, experiencing through augmented reality the moment that changed banking forever. As Mr. Thompson concluded his holographic appearance at the conference, he shared a final reflection: 40 years ago, a moment of prejudice could have ended in anger. Instead, it sparked a movement that proved treating people with dignity isn't just right, it's revolutionary. The story of that autumn morning had become more than a banking legend. It was a testament to how one person's dignified response to prejudice could transform not just an industry, but humanity's approach to finance and technology. Heritage National Bank stood as living proof that success in any era, whether digital, quantum, or whatever the future might bring, always comes back to a simple truth: every customer deserves respect, and every interaction matters. This conclusion to the 8-part story brought everything full circle, showing how a single morning of prejudice had sparked a 40-year journey of transformation, innovation, and positive change. The lesson remained timeless: the best response to prejudice isn't retaliation, but transformation.